Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe here in Brussels. Back in the 1990s, the American diplomat Richard Holbrooke penned a famous article in Foreign Affairs magazine entitled America, a European Power. And in this article, Holbrooke expressed the traditional view of America's role in Europe, which that it was an indispensable honest broker in solving Europe's ancestral historical disputes. And there was evidence of this in the 1990s. For example, the United States pushed hard for the reunification of Germany, where many European countries were hesitant. Holbrooke himself boasted later on that he had been up all night working the telephones when Europe was sleeping, while Greece and Turkey almost came to blows over an uninhabited rock in the eastern Aegean. But lately, this idea of the indispensable American role in Europe's diplomacy has faded, as President Trump has shown little inclination to back NATO, and recently even announced that he wanted to withdraw nearly 10,000 US forces from Germany. America has seemed to be little engaged in North Africa, where Europe is facing security challenges, or to the east, for example, in Ukraine, where the diplomacy has been led by France and Germany. But wait just a minute, some interesting things are happening. Suddenly, the US seems to be back as a major European diplomatic player. This week, Secretary of State Pompeo is in Greece, cementing a new military partnership with that country and building energy ties, but also usefully nudging the Greeks to enter negotiations with Turkey over the disputed oil and gas drilling in the Eastern Mediterranean. It was an American diplomat, Matthew Nimitz, who worked tirelessly for 20 years to finally resolve the name dispute between Greece and Macedonia. And just a couple of days ago, President Trump treated us to the spectacle of a White House meeting between Serbia and Kosovo when they signed an agreement on the normalization of their economic relations. And the US has announced sanctions against Belarus because of the fraudulent elections at a time when the EU, unfortunately, is still paralyzed on this issue. So does this mean that we can once again sit back and depend upon the United States to solve Europe's diplomatic problems for it? No, is my answer, and for four reasons. Number one, American attention tends to be somewhat transitory. It's sometimes there and sometimes isn't. I mentioned that the US has not been very engaged in Libya, although it was part of the air campaign back in 2011, nor in the diplomatic search for a solution to Ukraine, where France and Germany have been negotiating with Russia. Number two, the Europeans clearly are going to have the long-term burden financially and politically of reconstructing many of the countries in the south and the east and tying them closer to the European markets and the European democratic system. Number three, there is always a risk if the United States re-enters the European diplomatic game that it might be pushing a separate track to the EU. And if parties suddenly believe that they can play Washington off against Brussels, we're not going to be any further forward at all. And therefore, it's great to have the US back, but it's best if the EU can coordinate with Washington behind a single set of objectives and a single negotiating tactic. Finally, the United States, inevitably in the 21st century, is going to be more involved in the Asia-Pacific region. It sees China rather than Russia as the principal threat. So in sum, it's great to have the US back, but if that is a reason for the Europeans to take their foot off the geopolitical gas pedal and have a greater role in the region, I think that Brussels would be making a grave mistake. Thank you for listening, and I very much hope that you will join me again this time next week.